Which decade do you think is the most difficult for most people? Is it your 30s, your 40s, your 60s, your teenage years, your 20s? Which one do you think? Let's talk about it. Hi, this is Michelle, and welcome back to Call Me Crazy. Today is Sunday, November 16th, 2025. I decided to film outside today just for something different. It's just such a nice day. I hope I can do this because the sun is right in my eyes, but hopefully I don't squint too much. But I wanted to talk today about which decade in someone's life, for most people, is the most difficult. I think that your 40s and your 50s are really the most difficult years, and I will explain why. Now, I'm going to be talking through the lens of somebody who is married and has children. Now, some of these things can also apply to single people without children, but the majority of these things will probably apply to people who are married or in a long-term relationship and who also have children. And so I remember when I was in my 40s, I'm in my 50s now, I thought that life felt very hard. And I'm not saying that I have such a hard life and life is so hard and life is so difficult. I'm not saying that because I think I am very lucky in a lot of ways. In a lot of ways, I'm very privileged. And I recognize that, and I'm not denying that. But relative to previous years in my life, I felt like life was very hard. Now, for a long time, I thought it was because I had moved to a new country, and that comes along with a lot of challenges and a lot of adjustments. But as I started to reflect more and more, now that did contribute to it, but in a general sense, I think it goes deeper than that, and I'm going to explain what I mean. When someone gets into their 40s, generally speaking, there's going to be things that are going to make your life, your life gets more complicated, more layers are added to your life, and your level of stress is going to increase as you get older into your 40s and 50s. Now, I'm going to give you some examples. If you have a high-paying job or a career, or you try to climb the corporate ladder, most likely when you get into your 40s, you're going to be in the peak of your career. You're going to be at the height of your career. You're going to be at that point where you have the most level of responsibility. You're going to have the most level of stress. You're probably going to have the longest hours. And this is going to be the peak time of your career. So along with that comes with added stress. You're probably going to be in your peak earning years. And your peak earning years means higher taxes. You're in a higher tax bracket. You have more tax liability that comes along with that. So this is going to increase your stress level as you get into your 40s and 50s, because most people are at the peak of their career in their 40s and their 50s, generally speaking. Now, that's number one. Number two, when you get into your 40s and 50s, more than likely you probably have either teenage children or you have children that are young adults, and they're still depending on you for financial reasons and other reasons as well. So you may have adult children that are still living with you, and that comes along with challenges because now you have to navigate your children living with you, but they're now adults. So the rules kind of change and the dynamics are very different living with someone who is a minor who's under your authority and living with someone who's your child but they're now an adult. So that's a whole different thing to have to navigate, living with an adult that's your child. I mean, they still have to live under your rules, but you also want to respect them being an adult. So that can become kind of challenging navigating that. And then your older children may still depend on you for financial reasons. So I just have some notes I'm looking at. They may still need help with some of their bills. They're just getting started in a job. They're just getting started in a career. Maybe they have student loans that they're still paying. Maybe they are in college and you're paying their college tuition. Maybe they need help with big purchases. Maybe they're purchasing a home or moving into their own place for the first time, and they might lean on you for, for that big push that they need. Maybe they need a down payment or something like that, and they're leaning on you for that. They may still need advice or guidance with big life decisions. Maybe a relationship, maybe a marriage, maybe starting a new job, maybe moving to a different country or a different state. These are all things that young adults are navigating, and they're going to look to you for help. So all of this is going to bring your stress level up, because these are added responsibilities that you didn't have before. And number 3, you probably have parents that are aging, and your aging parents need help. They need help. They may, this is not everybody, but a lot of people, when they get into their 40s and 50s, their parents are now probably in their 70s or 80s. And now their parents are maybe have health issues. Maybe they're in decline physically. Maybe they can't handle their own financial affairs. Maybe you have to set up like things like power of attorney and living trusts and living wills and things like this. And all of this adds added pressure, because you're responsible for yourself, you're responsible for your spouse to a certain extent, you're still somewhat responsible for your adult kids. Now you're taking on the responsibility of your aging parents who need help. So you've got all these things just coming at you, and this is just added stress. And then your parents might also need help with things like estate planning, and because they're coming to the end of their life, and they may need help with what do I do with my house after I pass away? What do I do with my investments? How do I set all these things up so it's seamless for everybody? And you may have siblings that are also in the same position, and now trying to navigate with your siblings how to help your parents, and you might not agree on everything, and then there's strife in the family and fighting over this and fighting over that, and it's just a lot going on. So number 4, in your 30s, I would say beginning maybe in your 30s, but definitely going into your 40s and 50s, this is when a lot of people at this stage in their life, they go through divorce, or they go through a fractured family, or they may end up with a blended family. They may be going into a second or third marriage. So there's just layers and layers of things that get added on. So you may be dealing with a broken family, you may be dealing with a divorce, you may be dealing with going to court, dealing with child custody battles, dealing with having to separate assets, fighting over these things, having to hire a lawyer, having to move to a different place. Maybe you're in a situation where you had to move out of your house and move to a different place, and all of this is just stressful. And it's more likely that this is the time in your life when these things are going to happen, just generally speaking. Number 5, when you get into your middle age, 40s and 50s, you have to start thinking about your own retirement, your own estate planning, your own financial affairs you have to get in order, because you're getting to those years where you have to think about those things. So now, not only do you have to help your parents, but you also have to look at you and your spouse and your kids and how you're going to arrange your own financial planning and things like this, and retirement, and how you're going to distribute your assets when you're gone. So this is just more layers of things that you have to think about. Number 6, your own health and well-being comes into focus at this age. When you're a teenager in your 20s, maybe even your 30s, you can buy a lot of time. You can abuse your body. You can eat whatever you want. You can not exercise. You know how it goes. So there's only so long that you can put things off before you have to really start taking your own health seriously, because you start to realize, especially as you see your parents start to age, you realize that, hey, I really got to start taking care of myself and taking my own health seriously if I want to live long and I want to be strong into my older years. And I don't want to have other people have to help me if I can avoid it. Sometimes you still can't avoid it, but you try your best to put yourself in the best position to not have to depend on other people and not be a burden on other people. So all of these things start to come into focus as you get into your 40s and 50s. Number 7, your need for your need for professional assistance increases. What do I mean by this? If you're going through a divorce, you may need a divorce lawyer. If you're dealing with your own estate or your parents' estate, now you need help with estate planning. Your taxes are becoming more complex as you start to earn more, and you might need a tax expert to help you with that. If you're going through a divorce or something of this nature, you may need help buying or selling a home. You might even need help with your kids, helping them to buy a home. So, unless you really have expertise in these areas, which you may have expertise, but not in all of these areas, you're going to need to get most likely professional help with a lot of these things. And this is going to increase your time, your energy, your financial burden. So all of these things becomes more complex and adds more layers of things that you have to think about and deal with as you get older. Number 8, you may have more people that depend on you financially. Well, we talked about older kids, adult kids. If you're in a second marriage, you may have kids from your first marriage. You may have kids from your current marriage. You may be responsible for child support. You may be paying alimony. You may have an ex-spouse that is still depending on you for certain things. You have a current spouse that's depending on you. So depending on your stage in life, if you're in a second marriage or something like that, or even if you're divorced and you never got remarried, just the divorce itself comes with some responsibilities that you may still be taking care of. So, and then you may have grandkids. Grandkids, they might not really depend on you financially, but sometimes it could happen. Your kids may ask for assistance when they have children. Maybe things are tough and they reach out to you for help. So the way I look at it is, in life, of course, this is generally speaking, it's not going to be everybody, but as a general rule, when you're coming up in your teens and you don't really have a lot of responsibility, you're under your parents' roof, and as you get older and you start to drive and maybe you start to get your first job and you start to make a little bit of money and you start to have a little bit of responsibility, that your life gets a little bit more difficult. Then you get into your 20s, maybe you're starting in your career, maybe you're in university or college, maybe you are moving out of your parents' house for the first time, you're buying your first house, you're starting your job, maybe it starts to get a little bit more difficult. Maybe into your 20s and 30s you start to have kids of your own. It's a little bit more difficult. Maybe you now have a mortgage. You're getting more and more high in your career. It's getting more and more difficult, and it goes up like a bell curve. And at the top of that bell curve, in my opinion, is your 40s and your 50s. That's when all those things I spoke about come into play. Your 40s and 50s is just difficult. And as I really reflected on it, I realized that, not all of these things, but a lot of these things applied to my life. And I realized that's why I was feeling like things were so difficult, because, these are things that, some of these things I went through, and a lot of people go through these things in their 40s and 50s. And I think as you peak at your 40s and 50s in terms of difficulty, in terms of your life being complex, and then I think it starts to come down on the other side when you get into maybe like your 60s and you're getting into retirement. And maybe by this time your parents have passed on, and maybe you don't have that responsibility anymore, and your kids are much older and they don't really depend on you anymore, maybe occasionally but not as much, and they're living their own lives and they have their own families, and you kind of quote unquote go off into the sunset, and then things start to get a little easier. I'm not there yet, but from what I could surmise, into your 60s and 70s, it's going to get a little bit easier. Is somebody? I thought I heard somebody. As you get into your 60s and 70s, I think these things will start to dissipate and things will get a little easier. So I think you start out real easy in your teenage years, you go up, you peak into your 40s and 50s, and then you start to come back down into your 60s and 70s, and I think things start to get a little easier. And I keep keep hearing somebody. I actually asked my mom, because my mom's in her 70s, if what I'm saying makes sense, and has that been her experience in her own life, and she said yes. So I think I didn't think I was way off, because I was thinking maybe I'm way off the mark, but I don't think so. So yeah, so that's my video for today, and thank you to all people who have been listening and subscribing. I'm still aiming for my 500 subscribers by the end of the year. Hopefully I can get there. And thank you for sharing the videos and commenting and subscribing. But tell me down in the comments below, is what I'm saying making any sense? Are you below your 40s? Are you over your 40s? Have you experienced any of these things? Does this make sense? Something's there. So just let me know what you think. And that's my video for today, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.